Hello. Okay, well, they'll come up with the presentation. I'm going to talk from here because I'm too short to be up there. When Osfrey asked me to do this presentation, I was so honored. And when I started writing it, I started becoming a little bit concerned because I knew all the women there. And then this image of this young man in the past Rio meeting, he had a t-shirt that said, "Were you in Rio 20 years ago?" And then he turned and said, "What the are you doing here?" So, because gender inequality is the most pervasive and unacceptable condition still in this 21st century. So please accompany me in this journey to try to bring tribute to some of the women and men that have paved the road for us to be here. And the past is linked with the present by an unbroken chain of events. Each one of you have been part of this chain that has been flowing one to another. Next one. The Rio Era. Can I see some hands? How many of you were in Rio? Who? Yes, Vandana. Who can forget Bella? Who can forget? And I'll tell you a joke, not a joke, an anecdote about Bella. I went to this tattoo shop, and I was looking at a magazine, and 5 pages were possibilities of doing a tattoo with Bella. And I thought, my goodness, if you can get down to this situation, you are and were one of those inspirations. Next one, please. Who can forget the Rio, the first World Women Congress for a Healthy Planet, the Women Action Agenda, the Women Tent. It was a real tent that gathered thousands and hundreds of women. Chapter 24 of Agenda 21, one of those visionary documents that came after that, and 145 references. That's what the movement, that's what the women were able to achieve. Next one, please. And the Rio Conventions. So after all this push that the women gave, we have right now UNEP, when a Gender Plan of Action for 206, the CBD, a Gender Plan of Action for in 208, UNCCD. The 3 Rio Conventions and the GEF have part-time gender focal points, and the CBD and UNFCCC recognize women as a major stakeholder. Next one. But there had been those that had endured, and some of them are not here, but Ulrike, Mino, and Marta Benavides back there. How many of you were in COP1 of the Climate Change Convention? Okay, so you're part of those that have endured since there, and we honor you for being with us since that part. Next one, please. And the new alliances. Who are the new alliances in climate change? Next one. We have the GG Secretariat, the Women Constituency Group, advocacy team. We have women like Bridget and Ira and Sian and Ulamila, and the specialists like Lian. Lian, where are you? Lian Shalatek, our leader on finance. Red, Andrea, Janet. Energy, Gail, Anna, Sheila, that are here, that has also been with us in this process. Next one, please. And what are all these new alliances achieving? Cancun, the first agreed text, Durban, 19 references, and the first gender-responsive climate change strategies and red roadmaps in the world. Next one, please. And the champions from the field. Can I see how many of you work in the field? Do practitioners, real work, like Rosemary, like Dora, like the women from the Peruvian Amazon, and the million of women that every day face climate change. Next one, please. Women leaders that have embraced gender as well. Next one. We have Christiana, we have Julia, we have Sally with us, and we have Mary Robinson. These are some of the women that have been champions and some of these leaders that are with us as well. But, next one, there are some of those men as well. Next one, please. We have Akim Steiner and Amek Jotlov that developed and promoted gender in their institution. And we have here today Ted Turner, that has always also been one of those men for making possible the Girl UP campaign and every woman, every child. So, Mr. Ted Turner, you are one of those men today with us. Thank you very much for that. We have Ben Kamour from Liberia, first party to demand gender considerations in UNFCCC. Next one, please. Felix Feldman, Germán Antonio Vargas, Alan Bold, René Zelaya from Mozambique, that had said, my program in Mozambique on climate change, it's all about women and girls. And that he will not negotiate. Next one, please. But there has been those that has left us too early as well. Those two colleagues, Marie Can from the CBD and Camarunga, should have been with us here today. Next one, please. So the past was worth remembering and knowing in its own right. It is not behind us, but under us, holding us as a foundation for all that was to come and everything that have ever been. That's us, that chain, all of us together, working and fighting for the right of women and men to make this world a most just and democratic world. Thank you very much.
It's an honor to remember colleagues, sisters who've been part of this struggle and been such an inspiration. The Europeans were complaining a lot that I was abandoning them for these 2 days to come here. And I said, that's where I started 4 decades ago with the Chipko movement. And there's a part of the Chipko slogan that was about climate change already. Yeah. The Chipko movement to protect the Himalayan forests challenged the idea of growth which measured trees which were killed as contributing to growth and trees that were left standing as not contributing to growth. And I remember a particular occasion, it was 1977. And the government had tried to be smart and said, okay, we won't give private commercial contracts. We will create labor contracts. And in a village called Advani, it's the chief of the village who got the contract for the labor, of course. The timber went nationally, globally. And it was the wife who led the protest. And women had come from all over with lanterns. And the police was there, the forest officials were there. And they said, why are you carrying lanterns during the daylight? And they said, not to show light to the sun, but to show you light. Because you think the main products of the forest are timber and revenue and raisin. Raisin because the pine tree gives a raisin that is a very important raw material. And we want to tell you that the real products of the forests are soil, water, and pure air. Then we had flooding in '78, and the government realized the women were right. The budget for flood relief was much bigger than the revenues from logging. And one of the exercises that is worth taking up as a women's network is add up all the damages. I remember about 4 years ago when they were talking about how much would be the commitment on climate change relief. I think it was about 30 billion they were talking. That was the damage done in India in 1 year due to extreme floods in one region and extreme drought in another region. If we start adding the costs of all the climate chaos and show the sums, this idea that we can't afford to change the economy will be buried just like the idea that the forests of the mountains were timber mines was buried in 1981 as a result of a movement that fought 10 years, day in and day out. And when the floods were there, then they said, but the pure air business, but there too, women were way ahead of their time because the pure air issue was linked to climate change. One of the things we should definitely say no to is the commodification and financialization of the ecological services. The conversion by trees of carbon dioxide into oxygen, how can you own that as a commodity to trade on Wall Street? 1985 was the first time the Women's Conference in Nairobi introduced ecological issues. Wangari and I brought women and ecology. And that's the time my publisher said, write a book. I said, I've given up writing. I shucked the rat race of academics, publishing, etc. She said, write it as a subversive book. So I did. I wrote Staying Alive. We already had the remembering of the public hearing in Miami that led to the establishment of We Do with Bella and Wangari and Marilyn Waring. And I dedicated my time to the Convention on Biological Diversity. And I remember once sitting around, we found suddenly the men were no more there. Part of it was pressure was brought, men are in the club, so it's easier to pressurize. Women are outsiders. So that's when we formed the Diverse Women for Diversity, to counter the monocultures of the mind. WTO, DWD took on the World Trade Organization, and we said WTO is women take on the World Trade Organization. We will not trade away our lives. We will not. Our world is not for sale. That was the slogan in Seattle. And one of my favorite things in Seattle was the Raging Grannies. All 80 and above women from Canada, brilliant. I want to wrap up in the 30 seconds. You are such a brilliant timekeeper. Next year will be 30 years after Bhopal, since Bhopal. And we've been talking, and yesterday there was a little discussion. Those chemicals in agriculture have a role in climate change. Nitrogen oxide is 300 times more lethal than carbon dioxide in damaging the climate. And it comes from nitrogen fertilizers, which also are killing the oceans and creating dead zones. So Laura and I have been talking over the last few days. So I think in addition to everything else, we do need a call to stop the chemical warfare on the planet and our lives. And while the last 2 decades were decades of specialization, some of us went off to the climate negotiations, some of us went off to the CBD, some of us didn't go off anywhere and just did the work at home. I think the time has now come to make the connections across the issues and at all the levels. And it's the day we make those connections and make those connections alive and fertile that the change will come naturally. It'll flow like a river. Thank you.